I'm Red Robinson, and these are the Legends of Rock. Donovan was often labeled as England's Bob Dylan. I asked him how he felt about the comparison.
He and I came out of the same background. I mean, folk music is with a harmonica. And it's true to say that you could have linked me with him for the first 15 months of my career. But after then, what I did was I developed my own sound, as it were. But people did link me to him. In England, it was called the Battle of the Charts. Who would get to the top of the charts first? But when Bobby Dylan came over to England, and everybody hit him with this press thing, have you heard of Donovan? You know, he's copying you. He said, who's Donovan? Play me his record. And they played him the record, and he said, he doesn't sound like me. He sounds like Jack Elliott. So Bobby and I had a good relationship, but press-wise it looked like that. Now, what I have to say is it's an honor to be linked to the man, because he's a great songwriter, great artist of our century. He's like the Elvis of folk music to me. Well, he's a kind of an Elvis figure, but because we wrote songs, we were linked. What it did for me when I was 18, when everybody said, oh, you're copying him, it only gave me an edge to push myself harder. And I pushed myself harder and harder because I was at great pains to tell people, yes, there's some similarity. Woody Guthrie, Jack Elliott, the harmonica playing, the jeans, the cap. And I did emulate him. And what many people don't understand is that I did not imitate him. I emulated him. I emulated the man because from the very first day I heard him, I said, I want to do that. And then 20 years down the road, what have we got? We've got a body of work called Donovan's work and Dylan's work, and it's obvious that if I only had copied him, I wouldn't be here today, still singing music to a crowd in Vancouver like this.
That's right. You know, I was just thinking though, Donovan, you know, folk, you described yourself right, it's folk music. What's interesting, and don't you feel the same way, folk music that came out of America with Seeger and Guthrie and all of that, yeah. It went back to England, but that's where it all began anyway.
Yeah, it was a kind of I mean, not many people know that Dylan came over in '63 to England and met a lot of my folk singing friends and actually took melodies of the Scottish and Irish tradition and put his own music, put his own lyric to the music there. It is linked, and Joan Baez and Seeger and all the Seeger family, they knew the link between the Scottish and the folk tradition of America and the Irish folk tradition of America. It's linked, and let's face it, the English people were much quicker to emulate the blues singers than the Americans. Yes. And it was the Stones and the Yardbirds and all the bands that came out of England. We emulated the black folk musicians of America, and when you pull the music of the black American tradition apart, you see these British roots. So it's a kind of linked, yeah, it's all one, really.
You consider yourself a poet. When you look back at what they called flower power, I mean, the media always has a name for something, but your name stands out in that crowd. And I mean, they talk about the British invasion, but yours was really more of what I call the flower power birth out of San Francisco and all the things that followed that.
Well, I have a very unique position in the 60s, really, because when everybody stopped dancing, they put on a Donovan record. In the evening when they cuddled their loved one, maybe they put on a love song of the current hit, but hundreds of thousands of people put on a Donovan record to make a relationship with their woman, because I was probably, when you look at it, I was the only male in the 60s that sensitized the male position. I feminized the male in the sense that I wasn't gay, but I could look at a male situation with a woman and relate to a woman in a certain way, to do with flowers or to do with soft sort of ways of looking at it. And in the early 60s there, people used to say, Donovan thinks the world is beautiful. The banners, the headlines in England were, Donovan thinks the world is beautiful, 2-inch headlines. And what they were actually saying was, Donovan is not macho. But it was an echo of what was going to come, that males were going to be sensitized, and I was the first to sensitize the male's position. So flower power to me is kind of mixed up with meditation and such like. But of all the males in the 60s, I was the only one that could actually talk about a strong male position that could be sensitive, that could talk about flowers, and that could talk about a two-way relationship with a woman that didn't necessarily have to be like the Stones, you know, under my thumb. It didn't have to be like that. There was another way of looking at it. And so Flower Power for me is a media event that was projected onto me, and I was supposed to be the Prince of Flower Power. But all I was really talking about was that there is a way a male can sensitize himself, and that has happened. And so you got your male liberation through this, but then females became harder maybe, and males became softer, and then we find that it goes the other way. It goes, I mean, I'm the artist. It's up to you, media people, to look at it and try and clarify. But this is my thoughts on it.
Tell me one last thing. In watching the audience today react to you, you're a man in the middle of a stage, on a stool, the harmonica, a guitar. You have a rapport with the people, and they stand up and give you, after all of these years, a tremendous warmth and applause. What does that do for you as a performer?
Well, I have a performance to do, and I have various technical things I have to do to make my music project. But B, my music has entered the national consciousness of most Western nations. Apart from the basic thing that certain people made relationships to a song, say Sunshine Suit Man, they met their lover when they heard that song. That's too simple to clarify me. Actually, to clarify my impact on the whole scene is that people have adopted my music as a soundtrack to their life. And I not only sang love songs, but I sang about children, about meditation, about life in general, as a poet, as you say. And so many different styles of people have a relationship with certain songs. It's not as simple as boom, 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 ba da da da, and they were just sort of loving each other in a dance hall. No, it's very complex. It's like older people from 65 onwards. There was people in the audience in 65 that were 50 years old. There was children there. There was teenagers. There was middle-aged people. So my music has an unusually wide spread. So what does it do for me? It confirms that the music is a community art, and that in an audience, in a live audience like this, I try to neutralize all the age groups. That's what my job is on stage. But my music on record has had an enormous impact on how people look at their children, or how people look at themselves, or how people look at their friends, and that's quite unusual. That is probably my most unusual impact on popular music, that I don't fit into the rock and roll slots that are there. But I've been accepted.
You brought gentleness to music, if I could say.
Yeah, and yet music in its essence is a gentle art. That military people have used music to rouse nations, but I've used music to actually pacify a lot of people. And that, if one said, what is Donovan's impact in the last 20 years? That when the rock and roll had ended, when the party was over, when the trip was over, when all the problems came down to it, hundreds of people have written to me to say that one song has taken me through a problem that I thought I had, and it eased that problem. It took the edge off the problem, and so I pacify it. And this is the message of peace.
Yes.
That I think John Lennon and Donovan are very linked in that sense, that we've always tried to make this message of peace that pacifies the emotions. And I try to not say that it's religious, because religion to me was fixed, but it is religious in the sense that music has always been a movement to pacify the emotions in the ballad sense.
It's the words of the soul.
Yeah, it's the song of the soul. I mean, when Elvis sang his most heartfelt ballads, I think he centered nations into a spiritual feeling, which you could call it Christianity, but I don't think it's called that. It's actually pacified a lot of emotions, and a lot of the rockers were heavy, heavy guys.
Yeah.
I mean, rockers were bikers, and rockers were tough guys. But when Elvis sang that ballad, or that song, it brought all women and all men together, And Elvis's great legacy is that, I think. It's not his rock and roll songs. For me, it's not his rock and roll songs.
Ballads.
It's that beautiful ballad sense. And in a way, I was influenced by Buddy Holly and the Everlys and Elvis in that sense, that the ballad sense. And yet I brought lyric to it. It wasn't just I love you, you love me. I was of the 60s, whereas Elvis was of the 50s. But yeah, summing Donovan up, I'd have to leave it up to somebody else. But I was the singer, and still am, that can center the person in the reflective mode. I put people into a reflective mode.
Donovan, thank you for being with us, and I love your poetry. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you at the home of the legends, redrobinson.com.